Ignition sequence start. 6, 5.
It's one small step for man.
2, 1.
Everything is go here.
Welcome to Stay Relevant, my wandering conversations with interesting people. I'm Mike Sobola.
Hey, this is Houston, we're copying.
The Eagle has landed.
My guest today is Jay Schlossberg of Media Central LLC and the newly formed Media Central Films. He's also the director of Feast Your Ears, the Story of WHFS 102.3 FM. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you. Good to be here.
You know, we've known each other for quite a long time, and I thought you'd be perfect for a podcast on staying relevant because Media Central has managed to stay relevant over the time I've known you for over 20 years, I think it has been.
When I started Media Central in '93, that was a reinvention. I'd been working as a director of marketing or a salesperson, in the film and video community in Washington, and found myself without a gig. And 30 days later, my company was born, and I'd never owned a company. I'd never done that before. I'd never done accounting, doing my own accounting and billing and paying people, and it's a whole other story unto itself. But that was another reinvention.
Do you find today, though, that with all the social media, everybody online, that it's more difficult for your business? Or did it ever get that way? I mean, people think, everybody wants something for nothing. They want everything. They want somebody who can shoot, edit, write, produce, direct, all at once. They want to be able to go and get somebody on the internet themselves. They think they can find that.
Well, there's always people who want to do it themselves. I run across production managers in the industry that might be working in LA or New York, and they're booking crew for a number of different series, and there are just some that just want to do it all themselves. They just are, and so they won't use my service or anyone else.
Which is fine if you know where to go and who to talk to.
Right.
I'm thinking that you bring value.
Well, yeah.
Because you know people.
That's right.
You know who's good and who's not.
That's right, and these are, now that I've been in business almost 22 years, these are some crews I've been using for 22 years. And there's a lot of camaraderie, a lot of loyalty, a lot of understanding, some true friendships have come out of that. And so when I have a client that needs something in particular, a special creative way, or if the budget's pinched or whatever, I can go to these people who I've been booking, literally some of them hundreds of times over these couple of decades. If I need to make something special happen, it's a lot easier for me than for them to just happen to call that same person, not knowing that I know them, to try to get something special because, who's this person? Never heard of this person before. So it gives me, I guess, a kind of a buying power in a way when we need something, special for someone.
You also broke into not just crews, but you started doing post-production.
No, always did from the beginning.
Okay.
In the very beginning, it was crew, production, and post services. So that could be a crew, that could be a satellite truck, it could be an edit suite, it could be animation, it could be a script writer, it could be somebody scoring original music. It was really complete production and post services wherever you wanted them. That was really the approach.
And you have you branched out. You became a production company, a film producer. I mean, where are you?
Well, that was until much later. That was probably not in maybe 3 years ago or so.
And why did you feel like you had to do that, and what led you to that?
Well, part of it was I'm a musician. I had a band here in the DC area back in the late 70s, and so I was missing that creative output. I still play, I still write in my living room. That's how I met my current wife, was way back then, and she's a musician as well. We had the band together. Okay. I was still doing that for myself personally, but I was looking for something else, some other way to challenge myself creatively. And I just thought, well, maybe being a roofer or building swimming pools wouldn't be something new for me. Maybe I'd do something I sort of knew something about. And so this idea came, and it came around cars, actually. That was something I wasn't expecting. I've always liked them, but I'm not a car freak. I don't watch racing or that sort of thing. I just love a beautiful car, the architecture, the design, its performance. And so we, through my brother in Florida, who is not only just the world's foremost Morgan mechanic, if you know what a Morgan car is. It's a British car over 100 years old, but he also works on Lamborghini, Maserati, BMW. He's well known for being a top Porsche guy in the South Florida region. And so he's just pretty much a genius at doing this sort of thing. And we talked about this idea of maybe creating a series around the people that own those sorts of cars, that collect them, drive them, design them, build them. And so this sort of idea came about for something that was called Auto Exotica. So we pitched it, it didn't go anywhere. It's the first thing I'd ever done. And so out of that spun the Cars and Coffee series, which was me hearing about these Saturday or Sunday morning car meetups. And so I thought maybe I could start one. So I found this location in Bethesda that worked really well, nice parking lot, and there was a bakery there. And so we got them to give everybody a free cup of coffee. And so in April of 2012, myself, a friend of mine and his car, and a cousin of mine and his car, we were the only three people there. And we were looking out the window at our cars going, what are we supposed to do? We had coffee, we kind of talked, and then that was it. So a couple of months later, all of a sudden I had 25 cars, 30 cars, 40 cars, and I looked around and thought, you know what, somebody should shoot this. So I did. And so we did 6 episodes of Cars and Coffee. Bethesda, Las Vegas, Santa Barbara, Cincinnati, Palm Beach, and then Paris, France. And as you may remember, the Paris, France episode won a TIVA Peer Gold Award this past November, which was a complete surprise to me. And so I didn't really expect that. So that's sort of how that happened, how I began to get into production. It wasn't like I woke up one day and thought, I'm going to be a producer and go bid on government projects and corporate things. It was about doing something that interested me on a topic that I found interesting, and ended up finding a bunch of very interesting characters. What I was getting out of it was cultural references, different environments. The cars were different because of the environment they lived in, and so it was more of not just about cars, but about how people live in different locations, how they speak, how they dress, what's going on. There's no palm trees in Cincinnati. So you were just seeing different environments, and you have the Eiffel Tower in Paris, and so we kind of featured all that, and it became almost like a travelogue / cultural / car show. And so that was the first thing I'd ever really done of any success. So,
and you mentioned a really key thing, I think, is that for staying relevant, you did something that you wanted to do that you were interested in. It wasn't necessarily that you wanted to become a producer. It was like, I really kind of want to do something creative.
That's it. That's
and
exactly it.
And it's led you down this road, which now, by the way, has you producing a feature film, a documentary.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, the documentary is called Feast Your Ears, the story of WHFS, 102.3 FM, which was a little station in Bethesda, Maryland.
I think everybody in this area knows.
Everybody in the Washington area, early to mid 40s and older would know. It really started in 1961 with these 2 engineers from the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab who decided they wanted to start a radio station. So they culled together, maybe they bought some gear, I think they built some gear, and they rented a 20 by 20 room in the Woodmont Medical Building on Woodmont Avenue in Bethesda. And I don't know if they were on a few hours a day or something, and they're both still alive. And I've spoken to them, and I haven't confirmed this yet, but I believe either all or part of their power was run by car batteries.
So,
yeah,
it's a good story.
These guys were really motivated. So they owned it for about a year or so.
But it wasn't moon rocks.
No,
not at that point.
And it was 90% classical, 10% jazz. So they didn't do well, financially, and within a year or so they sold the station. It turned over a couple of times. It moved to a different location in Bethesda, and then it was bought again, I guess in '66, by a gentleman named Phil Margolius, who's still with us, and his father. This was, almost 50 years ago, and another partner or two, and they were sort of doing the classical. By then, it was more middle of the road, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, that sort of thing. And they had some weekend programming, the Italian hour, the Greek hour, the Jewish hour, that sort of thing. And then I guess in '68, somebody approached them about a rock type show. I believe they had to buy the time from the station. Jake Einstein arrived as a sales guy probably in, I don't have the dates, nobody's really sure, maybe 66 or 67. And he eventually moved into being the general manager of the station and a minority owner. But so I believe it was Frank Richards.
It started as at the crux of what it became known for. It started as a sold show. You're saying?
That's right, I believe so. So the first
nice.
2 shows, and I think it was Frank Richards and a partner, and then Fred Serke right after him is 68, 69, early 69ish. It really hadn't caught fire. And then in July '69, these 3 young graduate hippies from Bard College in New York came down, Josh Brooks, Mark Gorbelou, and Sarah Voss, looking for a radio station to do this progressive freeform type programming.
And before that, what was it? What was radio like? It was very strict.
It was well, yeah. I mean, it was a playlist, and and that you stuck to the playlist, and that was pretty much it. There were radio commercials, and it was just nothing in particularly special about it.
It wasn't a focus on the DJ necessarily.
No, not really. I mean, there were DJs in the '60s that were known in this area.
Wolfman Jack, Case National, for instance.
Yeah, that's right. There was
celebrities.
always somebody that would get some fame. Sure. But this is a little 2,900 watt station. This is not, sometimes you could be in Bethesda and not get HFS in your car. But anyway, so these 3 kids came down. They stopped at a bunch of different cities trying to sell this format. So they got into HFS and they met with Jake. It's been told to me in about 9 different ways, but essentially he's like, yeah, all right, well, tell you what, you have to buy the time for me and sell your own ads and cut the own ads, and you start on Monday. So they just bouncing off the walls happy, and they started whatever, it was July, we believe it was July 28th, 69, but it might have been 27th. We're checking the calendar to make sure we have the right date, but it was a Monday. This was a week after the moon landing that this thing began to take off. It was just a few hours a day. I think it was 4 or 5 days a week. Meanwhile, they were still doing that middle of the road stuff and the Italian hour, that sort of stuff on the weekends. And very quickly, it was really just a few months later, I think they went from, the slot they were in went to about 30,000 listeners.
Wow.
And
they were the DJs?
They were the DJs, the 3 of them. It was called Spiritus Cheese. That's what the name of the show was. They, either one or all of them, lived above a defunct cheese shop in New York City called Spiritus Cheese. So they just used that name. So that's when it began. Coincidentally, 3 weeks later was Woodstock. So the timing of things, with the moon landing and Woodstock, it was just sort of right in them. Just they didn't know; they were just doing what they were doing, right? But
it was kind of counterculture.
Well, it was very counterculture.
So that was a thing of the times as
well. They
well.
played whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted.
So when did we get start getting the people we know the Surf and the
Well,
Weasel?
right. So starting, so they were on till 1970, I think. Eventually, Sarah left, Mark left, and so I guess the Spiritus Cheese show maybe went a year-ish, and then in 1970, Surf turned up, and Damien Einstein, who's one of Jake's sons, and David both. Were at the station. They're both DJs. David was the program director, but there was no programming. I mean, you played whatever you wanted. That's what began
a good job to have.
That thing began to roll. But one of the really important things about this, is the music and all that, and adding the DJs and Weasel coming when he came. He started more as an engineer, first for Murray the K, the legendary 5th Beatle, and eventually became a DJ. But here's what I found most interesting was that when they started in July of '69, they had to go out and sell their own advertising, right? Because they were paying to be on the air, so they had to go sell ads to bring in money. So where did they go? Well, they didn't go to the dry cleaners or they didn't go to the local Chevy dealer. Where'd they go? They went to the local music store, the local head shop, the surf shop, the surplus store where you got your army jacket. So they went to the places that people like them would go shop. And I asked them about this. They didn't realize they were giving the whole community a central voice, where everything was sort of plugged in, the record stores, the nightclubs, everything. And as they started to add social things to it, Ride Board, the Housing Board, the jobs board, those sorts of things that to promote local culture and society, and then they were also playing the music of the local musicians.
Nice.
So all of a sudden the local musicians had a radio station playing their music, and so it was all these little components as well as what was going on in society in general. The civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, and the big daddy of them all, the anti-war movement. And the political center of all those movements was right here in Washington. So that's where I heard about I was 16. This is how I heard about the May Day protest on May 1st, 1971, to protest the 4 kids being killed in Kent State in May 4th, 1970, and an anti-war thing. I'd heard about that and organized a walk out of my high school. About 250 of us went downtown to protest the war and the killing of 4 students. Where'd I hear about it? HFS. It wasn't in the Washington Post or on the nightly news that was going to happen. So that was beginning, sort of a beacon of information about things that were going on in the community, with no corporate control, or as I call it, no suits.
And eventually it kind of ran its course.
Well, it did. I mean, it grew and grew, and then in 1983, in the spring of '83, they were finally sold to the Outlet Corporation. So they shut down, and Jake Einstein, who I said was a minority owner, then he bought some stations in Annapolis, Maryland, and it was reborn as 99.1 WLOM because that was the call letters of the station that he bought in Annapolis, Maryland. I think in December of that year, somehow he got the HFS call letters back. So then it became 91 HFS. But our film ends at the sale of Bethesda because everything changed.
Right.
A good amount of the DJs went to Annapolis, but it was different. The music was already changing. It was the Reagan years. I mean, everything was already changing. So eventually, down the road, Jake sold it, which became, and we had the HFS festivals and all that stuff. But that was completely different radio. That was corporate radio.
So your love of film, of music, kind of led you to the story, and how did you hit upon the idea to do the documentary?
Well,
when did you decide? Did the light bulb go off? What?
Yes, it's actually almost 2 years to today. It was April 20th, 2013, Record Day. And for those who don't know what Record Day is, that's when the independent record stores, used record shops have a record day to celebrate, vinyl and all that.
All 3 of them.
Oh, so that particular Saturday, it was a Saturday, I was out of town and couldn't go. So about a week later, somebody posted some photographs of Record Day at Joe's Record Paradise in Silver Spring. And Joe's been around for many decades with a used record store. And so the DJs were there. And there was a photograph of a panel of the DJs. It was Josh Brooks and Bob Schauerker, otherwise known as Bob Here, Surf, Weasel, Damien, Adele was there. And I saw this photograph, and I literally said out loud, and I believe my wife was standing in the hallway, "Oh my God, they're all not dead yet. Somebody needs to do something about this." And that was the seed. I realized that this was a beautiful story. Nobody told it. And they literally were all, Jake Einstein unfortunately passed away in 2007, so we don't have Jake. But most of the DJs were still alive. Most of the employees who were there are still around. And I thought if I was going to tell the story, I better get going. So that's kind of how it began. It's just about 2 years ago. And
you've done a few interviews. You've done
a lot
down the road.
Yeah, it took about 6 months or so to kind of get organized. And we had a meeting with many of the DJs and some of the employees. Now, HFS was at 4853 Cordell Avenue. In an apartment building called the Triangle Towers. So some of the catchphrases were, "This is Bob, we're HFS, 102.3 FM, high atop the Triangle Towers." Of course, they were on the 2nd floor and later the 3rd floor. But one of the famous DJs, Weasel, still lives in the building. So I called him up and asked if they had some sort of lounge in the building, and he said yes, they just fixed up this really nice lounge, so we all met there. So 31 years after the station had shut down, most of those people had not ever been back in the building. There have been other HFS reunions, at Strathmore and some other places where 8, 10, 12 of them get together, but never back in the Triangle Tower. So it's probably eerie for some of them, but to me it made perfect sense to have this meeting, are we going to do this movie or not, in the Triangle Towers. So we met and everybody said, yes, let's do this, and that was, so I began to do my research, and in June of last year began shooting.
And I understand your Kickstarter campaign launches on September 19th.
That's correct.
Tell me about that.
That'll be really exciting. We have a lot of great interviews, and we have some old sound bites and a little bit of old video, and lots of interesting things to show people to get them excited about the movie. And what I found in doing this film that really surprised me, I didn't expect this, was that I started a Facebook page for the movie just about a year ago. And I figured, here a year later, I'd have, 800 or 1,000 followers, or if I got really lucky, maybe 1,200 or something. And before I came here today, there were 11,650 followers on the Facebook page, which just blows my mind. This is a radio station that's been off the air 32 years now, and only was 2,900 watts. But there was something about these DJs, this music, the time. As one of our interviewees said, Mike Marone, who's the DJ on The Loft on Sirius XM, said it was the tribal beat. There was just something below the surface that we all connected to. And that is what people are plugging into. There's this longing. Look at all the posts that people put on there about the station, what it means to them, what it meant to them, what it still means to them today. And I've discovered that they just long for a direct connection to something that they can grab onto. In this age of iPhone and iPad and internet and nanotechnology and how far we've advanced technologically, we seem to be becoming disconnected as a community. And certainly people in our age group are just sort of hunger for that simplicity, that connection, that something that they can get their head around that has deep meaning to them. And it's all the different aspects of this. It's the DJs and the music and what was happening politically, socially, all that stuff, and they've just lost connection to that.
Well, it kind of brings it all together, like it did back then. This is bringing it back all together. It occupies a special place in their minds, I guess, and in their hearts, to be
That's
savvy.
right.
But that's what they remember. It's part of the good times of the past.
That's right.
And this is a way to go with it.
And I spent a lot of this time developing this movie, trying to find the heart. Trying to find the heart of it. And that's what I've discovered, is that there's this, it had its own pulse, its own beat, and people connected to it. And I guess another one of the surprises that I didn't think about was, this is a very transient city, Washington, D.C. So people come and go. And being a small station, and they didn't have millions of listeners. This wasn't a 50,000 watt, DC 101 or WABC New York. It wasn't a prime station like that. What I didn't think about was, in those years between 69 and 83, you had college students coming to town. American University, Georgetown, GW, University of Maryland in College Park. You had students coming through town, probably a couple 100,000 a year, who knows how many there were. And they'd graduate, and then new students would come in, and they were moving back to Kansas and having 5 kids or whatever. And, oh, my college years, I loved those. And they're finding out about the movie, and it's lighting them up. It's like they just, that was the sort of thing that happened, and it's ignited something in them. They didn't realize how much it meant to them, how much it's formed them in whatever way. And so that's where I'm finding the heart of this, is that they have this sense of belonging and all the things that come with that.
Tell me about what the plans are for it. When do you expect, is there a release date on the horizon? I know there's not a release date, but I mean, do you anticipate it being finished in what, a year, 3 years, 5 years?
If I could sprinkle fairy dust on it, it would be ready by the end of the year. Will it be? Might be. We've done a lot of interviews. There's already some more scheduled. And with the Kickstarter, that will be the rest of our production money to get, there's probably another 20 to 30 really that I could do. Whether everybody makes the film or not is, who knows. But, and then we just, we go into post, and it could be done by December if everything fell into place. Likely it'll be the spring of next year, but it's really hard to say. Some of these projects take years and years and years, and I don't want that to happen. There's no reason for that to happen. Plus, everybody's getting kind of old, so I want to make sure I get this movie out while the people, the musicians, the artists, whoever are still with us, and the fans that love the station and drove everything. Without the fans, you got nothing. And another motivating force for me here behind this film is it's my idea to give the DJs, the people who work there, the employees, and the fans, and everyone who supported the station, a big wet kiss. To just really elevate the station to the status that it deserves. As I've talked to these musicians, they've all pretty much said the same thing. Yeah, there was a freeform station in New York, and there's one in Boston, and there's Philly and Cleveland and LA, and I'd go there for an interview, whatever. But HFS, that was the one. That was special.
And what made it special? Like you said, there were other stations
Yes.
doing this around the country. Was it maybe the fact that they you said it built upon the community. It formed the central of the community, the nucleus of the community. Was it maybe the fact that they also infused local talent in their playlists?
It's a big part of it.
Was that something the other people weren't doing?
That's right. Maybe they were, but not to maybe the extent that it was here. I'll give you this one story. I don't know how many in your audience are going to know who either one of these acts are, but there was a famous folk duo called Ian and Sylvia, and they played the Cellar Door, which used to be at 34th and M Street, the premier club in Washington, I think. And the opening act was a young kid named Chris Smither, who just released his second record, and Bonnie Raitt has recorded some Chris Smither songs, and so they did their two sets, and at the end of the show, Ian asked Chris if what he was doing after the show. Well, I don't know. He said, why don't you come with us? We're going to this little station in Bethesda called WHFS. And why don't you come with us? He's like, he's like, look, you've got two records, right? He said, yeah. And Ian said, they're not just playing both your records. They're playing pretty much every song on both your records. He's like, okay. So they all went to Bethesda, got there, midnight or 12:30 or whenever in the morning. And he said, I was welcomed like a long lost brother. They hugged me, they had me come in. I brought my guitar, I played a few songs on the air. They interviewed me, they fed me. I've never had any experience like that. So it was really, the DJs and the musicians became this family. So there's a lot of long-term relationships between the musicians and the DJs at HFS. Even here, 30, 40 years later, they still maintain those relationships. I
think it's also perhaps the fact that, and you sort of touched on this, the fact that it was a time where people were actually invested in what's going on. They really cared about the wars that were going on. They would do something about it. There were protests. Because they cared. They thought they could make a difference.
That's right.
And you're tapping into that, and they remember that as part of their essence.
That's right.
I'm not sure it's happening as much these days, at least not on that visceral level.
I'm pulling for the millennials because I think that there's a lot of similarity. I think they're seeing what we were fighting for in the 60s and 70s. And the corporate takeover of everything worldwide, not just our government, but other governments. And I think that the lack of opportunity our young people have coming out of college, and I think that they want to see that change. It was really the same battle. It really is. And so I'm hoping that they're going to appreciate this film and what was trying to be accomplished by everyone in that era, and we can still do it, but hopefully they'll see that and help move society forward.
Well, we'll be looking for the Kickstarter campaign, and is there any keywords we should look for that, or?
Well, there is a
website. Is there a movie website or a movie page?
There is, yes. There's
the Facebook page.
The website is about to go up. The Twitter page is up but not announced yet. Okay. So those will both go up this month. before the Kickstarter goes up.
But you also have the Facebook pages.
The Facebook page, all you have to do is look up Feast Your Ears in the search window, and it should come right up. The title of the movie is Feast Your Ears, the story of WHFS 102.3 FM. That's the place to go first. All the announcements of the Kickstarter, the regular website, the Twitter page. We're going to have a blog, of course, and that's where you should go for now.
So what's on the horizon for Jay?
I kind of get drawn to the light in a way, or a light or something. I get drawn that way and I follow it, and that's what's happening with the movie and the Cars and Coffee thing and all the creative stuff. I'm just following that, I don't want to say bliss really, I'm just following my instinct, my dead reckoning of where I need to go. And that's how I reinvent myself.
Great. Well, Jay, thanks for coming.
Thank you. Good to be here.
My guest today has been Jay Schlossberg, president of Media Central Films and executive producer of Feast Your Ears, the story of WHFS 102.3. On the web at feastyourearsthefilm.com, where you can also find out about the Kickstarter campaign launching on September 19th, sign up for the newsletter, read the blog, or buy the first new HFS bumper stickers or t-shirts in more than 30 years. Thanks again, Jay.
Thanks for having me.
The podcast is Stay Relevant, wandering conversations with interesting people. Original music by Popmark Media, on the web at popmarkmedia.com. See and hear more on my website at mikesobola.com. Until next time, try and stay relevant.